She stood there, blinking at the Ziploc bag like it was something radioactive. Inside was a single sheet of paper. "You can read it here," I said, voice calm but high-pitched, the way it gets when I'm holding in a panic attack, or read it in the car. But either way, 30 minutes. Claire laughed, like a short, sharp laugh you'd let out if someone accused you of stealing a muffin. "You're serious?" she asked. I nodded. I wish I wasn't. She didn't open the bag. She just looked at me, her face soft with that same disappointed frown her mom used to give me when I forgot to defrost the chicken. That face was like an inheritance I never asked for. "I defended her," Claire said. "So you're kicking me out?" "No," I said, blinking way too fast. "I'm just redirecting you to your actual father. Efficient parenting." She dropped the bag on the couch like it disgusted her. It bounced once, the paper inside half visible. I could see the bold black type. Probability of paternity, 0%. 19 years. 19 years of playing pretend, and I didn't even know I was in a costume. You think it would feel like betrayal, but it actually feels like standing in a house where someone slowly, secretly pulled out all the nails. Everything looks fine, until it caves in on your head. She started to say something. I cut her off. "Don't defend her again." Claire's mouth closed. She looked wounded, which was rich, considering. I should rewind, I guess. Not all the way, just to 3 days ago. Jillian, my wife, I guess ex-wife now, had thrown herself a pity party in the kitchen after I brought up a name I wasn't supposed to know. Nathan. The name sat between us on the table like it had its own chair. "You're digging up ancient history," Jillian said, wrapping her fingers around her wine glass like it was a lifeline. "Ancient," I said. "It's not ancient if it's standing in my house calling me dad." She flinched. "So small you'd miss it if you didn't catalog every expression the way I do." But I saw it. Just like I saw the email 2 weeks ago that wasn't meant for me. A forwarded thread. A reply from someone named Nathan. "An old flame," she said. "Just checking in." But the messages didn't read like a check-in. They read like a restart. And one of them, dated from 2006, read, "If she's mine, I'll never forgive myself for walking away." I remember staring at that line like it was blinking. She is mine. You don't just guess something like that. Not unless there's a reason. And so I ordered a test. Quietly. Collected hair from Claire's brush like some lunatic. I felt disgusting. But not as disgusting as realizing I was the last to know I wasn't a father. I was a decoy. 9 days later, I had the result. And today, I had to hand it to my daughter. Well, Jillian's daughter. Nathan's daughter. Not mine. Not anymore. I checked my watch. 28 minutes left. Claire stood frozen in the living room, her duffel bag untouched. She looked at the paper again and finally whispered, "You still raised me." "I know," I said, "and I hope you never forget that. But I can't be the only one who pays the price for her choices." She started to cry, and for the first time in 19 years. I didn't try to fix it. She stood there like she expected me to take it back. Like this was all a show. Like I'd crack a joke, say gotcha, and ask what she wanted for dinner. Instead, I pointed at the bag again. "You're down to 24 minutes. "You're not serious," she said, blinking away tears. "You're doing this because I defended her? That's it. That's it." 19 years of silent loyalty, buried suspicion, and second-guessing myself. And that's how she summed it up? I walked past her toward the kitchen, hands shaking. I wasn't hungry, but I needed something to do. Something normal. I opened the fridge, stared at the half-full bottle of oat milk and a bag of grapes I knew she'd eat in one sitting. I wasn't even mad about the food. I was mad that I still knew her habits. I heard her behind me, breathing heavier now. She made a mistake. Claire yelled. "You act like she murdered someone." "She murdered the truth," I muttered. Claire scoffed. "You're acting like a child." I slammed the fridge shut. I was a child, I snapped. For 19 years, apparently. Silence. I turned around and saw something shift in her expression. Something between fear and pity. I hated it. "You know what's funny?" I said, grabbing the DNA test from the bag and holding it up. "This little piece of paper? It reset my entire life. Like hitting Control+Z on everything I thought was real." She tried to speak. I held up a finger. "Don't. Please don't say you're still my dad. You want that to be true, then you shouldn't have stood in my kitchen and told me to get over it. You don't get to rewrite the betrayal just because it's inconvenient." "I didn't know," she cried. "How could I know?" "You didn't want to know," I said, quieter now. "Because it was easier to play Switzerland." She slumped onto the bar stool. So what now? You're done being my dad? I didn't answer right away. The question hurt in ways I wasn't ready for. I'd taught her how to tie her shoes. I built her a treehouse even though I was scared of heights. I learned the difference between foundation and concealer just so I could buy the right makeup when she forgot it on that school trip in 8th grade. Was I done? God, no. But I couldn't keep pretending I wasn't bleeding. You sided with her before you knew the truth, I said, finally. Now you know, so you get to decide where you go from here. Claire crossed her arms. So you're giving me a choice? No, I said. I'm giving you a consequence. It hurt to say it, more than I'll ever admit out loud. But part of me needed her to feel just 1 ounce of the disorientation I'd felt the moment that test result hit my inbox. I needed her to stop looking at me like I was the unstable one in the room. The front door creaked open a minute later. Jillian walked in, sunglasses still on, keys dangling from her fingers. She stopped mid-step when she saw us. What's going on? She asked cautiously. Claire stood up too fast. Dad's kicking me out. I didn't correct her. I didn't say, you mean Dennis is kicking you out. Jillian's eyes narrowed. What the hell, Dennis? I held up the test again. She flinched like it was a loaded gun. You should have told her, I said. But you didn't. So I did. And for the first time in 19 years, Jillian had nothing to say. Jillian didn't speak right away. That was her move. Always wait until you can control the narrative. Let the silence stretch until the other person feels uncomfortable and starts filling in the blanks. But this time, I'd already read the script. I knew the ending. I just didn't like it. She put her purse down like we were about to have a civilized conversation. Like she didn't just walk into a house leaking from every corner with years of rotting lies. I thought we agreed not to involve her, Jillian said quietly, glancing at Claire. You agreed, I shot back. I never agreed to keep her in the dark about her entire existence. Jillian raised her voice just slightly. And what exactly does that accomplish, Dennis? Humiliating her? Kicking her out? How does that help anyone? She had a right to know, I said. And I had a right not to be treated like a rental car. Claire shifted uncomfortably, but didn't speak. I think, deep down, she wanted Jillian to own it, to say it was a one-time thing, to say she regretted it, to say she never meant for any of this to happen. But Jillian didn't say any of that. She just went straight into defense mode, like she always does. It was a different time, Jillian said. You and I weren't in a good place. We weren't even married yet, I snapped. And you let me walk down that aisle without a word. Do you understand how insane that is? She rolled her eyes. You always overdramatize everything. That word, overdramatize, hit harder than any insult could, because it's what she always used when I caught her in a lie too early. When I asked about texts that didn't make sense. About coworker dinners that started at 9 p.m. About phone calls she took in the backyard in her robe. Overdramatize. Like I was some emotional theater kid waving around red flags for fun. I was her father, I said, voice raw. In every way that mattered. And you knew, Jill. You knew. You watched me cry when she broke her arm in 3rd grade. You laughed when she called me daddy in her sleep. You let me believe she was mine. That's not just betrayal. That's calculated emotional fraud. Claire looked away. Her throat was tight. She wasn't crying, not really. But her eyes were glassy, and I could tell she was no longer sure which version of her life was real. Jillian finally sighed and leaned against the wall like she was exhausted. I made a mistake. A long time ago. And I've lived with it every day. No, you haven't, I said. You lived with a man who loved you. You lived in a house you didn't deserve. You watched me love your daughter like she was my blood and said nothing. Don't stand there and act like that was some kind of punishment. Claire finally stood up. Her voice was so small, it barely registered. Did Nathan know? The room went still. Jillian blinked. Claire asked again, louder. Did Nathan? No. Jillian's face betrayed her before her mouth did. There was hesitation, a twitch in the eye, a pause that lasted too long. Then, yes. Claire looked like she'd been slapped. So he knew, she whispered. All this time, he knew and I didn't. I felt like I wasn't even in the room anymore. Just a bystander in someone else's family drama. And maybe that's exactly what I'd always been. I was just the placeholder, I said under my breath. No one argued with me. No one said I was wrong. Claire looked at me then, for the first time really looked, and I saw the fear in her eyes. Not because I was yelling. I wasn't. I was calm. I was done. That's what scared her. She realized she'd never seen me like that before. cold, steady, finished. I don't want to go, she said quietly. I didn't ask for any of this. I nodded. Neither did I. And with that, I walked past both of them, grabbed my car keys, and left. I needed air. And maybe for the first time in 19 years. I needed space from the only person I ever thought I couldn't live without. I drove aimlessly for 2 hours. Through the back roads of Ashland County, past shuttered gas stations and lonely diners glowing in the dusk like forgotten movie sets. I didn't know where I was going. I just knew I couldn't be in that house anymore. Not with the echoes of things I couldn't unhear. At some point, I ended up in the parking lot of a bowling alley that hadn't changed since 1983. I sat in my car, staring at the cracked neon sign, and thought about how many birthdays I'd thrown for Claire over the years. The fairy tale cakes. The scavenger hunts. The scavenger hunt I made when she was 9 took me a full week to plan, and she solved it in 20 minutes. She was always smarter than me. Sharper. I loved that about her. But now all I could think was, none of that was mine. I had loved a stranger's daughter like she was my own. And the man who was her father? He'd just walked through 19 years with a free pass. Nathan Barlow. I couldn't get the name out of my head. The guy Jillian swore was just a phase. The guy she said didn't matter. And now he had a daughter he didn't raise, and I had a daughter who wasn't mine, and somehow, I was the one being called dramatic. That's when I made a decision I didn't think I'd ever make. I pulled up the address I'd found in the old county records, Nathan's. He hadn't gone far. 37 minutes south, still in Ohio, still pretending he wasn't a ghost in someone else's family photo. I drove. The sun had disappeared behind the hills when I pulled up to a modest house with a red truck in the driveway. 2 dogs barked from the fenced-in backyard. Porch light on. Kids' shoes by the door. He had a family. Of course he did. I should have left. I should have burned the address like I planned. But instead, I rang the doorbell. And when Nathan opened the door, wearing a hoodie and holding a beer, the look on his face wasn't confusion. It was recognition. "Dennis," he said like we were old friends. I froze. He knew my name. "Sorry," he added quickly. "You look just like your Facebook profile." "Jill," she showed me once. A long time ago. And just like that, the whole thing went radioactive. I wasn't just a victim of a lie. I was the butt of an inside joke. The other guy? The backup plan. The fill in the blank while the real father ghosted and then reappeared whenever it suited him. "I'm not here for a scene," I said, keeping my voice even. "I just need to know what you know. About her. About Claire." Nathan stepped aside. "You want to come in?" I didn't answer. I walked past him and into the house I'd never seen, but had probably paid for in karmic debt. He led me to the living room. Old baseball trophies. A wedding photo. A little girl, his daughter, maybe 7, smiling with missing front teeth. His real family. We sat. He offered me a beer. I declined. Then I asked, "When did you find out?" Nathan rubbed the back of his neck and exhaled. "She told me the day she found out she was pregnant. Said she wasn't sure, but deep down, she knew. She asked me to stay quiet. Said you were stable. Said I wasn't." I clenched my jaw. "She told me you were fragile," he added quietly. "Said you'd leave if you knew." I felt like I was going to vomit. Jillian had spent years painting me as some emotionally unstable safety net. The kind of man who couldn't handle the truth. The kind of man who'd run. I stayed. She lied. And somehow, I was the weak one. Nathan looked genuinely uncomfortable. I didn't reach out because I thought it would ruin everything. I figured if you were raising her, it was better that way. "You figured wrong," I said, voice shaking. "You let me live a lie for 19 years. He nodded. "You're right. I did." There was no defense. No righteous speech. He didn't even try. That made it worse. Because now I couldn't yell. I couldn't throw a punch. I couldn't unleash the fury that had been bottling up in my chest since the test results came in. All I could do was sit there. In the house of the man who got to be Claire's father without ever earning it. And that's when Nathan asked me something that broke my brain. "Is she okay?" It was genuine. That question. That tone. And for a second, I forgot how to breathe. He cared. Or at least he wanted to. And I hated him for it. I didn't answer him. That question, "Is she okay?" just hovered between us like smoke. Nathan sat on the edge of his couch, elbows on his knees, the kind of posture guys take when they're trying to look sorry but still protect themselves. I should have ripped into him. Told him no, she wasn't okay. That Claire cried herself to sleep 2 nights ago. That I found her balled up in a corner of her room with the lights off, holding an old photo of the 3 of us from Disneyland. that she kept whispering, I didn't know. But I didn't say any of that, because part of me didn't want to share those pieces of her with him. They were mine. Maybe the biology didn't line up, but those memories did. That version of Claire, the one who needed a night light until she was 10, the one who got stage fright during her second-grade play and ran into my arms instead of finishing her line. That was my version of her, not his. He didn't get to ask about her like he earned it. She's figuring things out, I finally said. Nathan nodded. Good. That's good. I stood up. I couldn't stay any longer. I could feel the edges of myself fraying. My jaw was tight. My spine hurt. I felt like I was made of glass, and every second I was in that room added another crack. He followed me to the door. I know this doesn't help, he said quietly, but I always wondered what it would have been like if I'd stepped up, if Jill had told her from the start. I turned around, looked him right in the eye. She didn't want a man who would step up. She wanted a man who would stay. He flinched. I left. On the drive home, I didn't listen to music. I didn't call anyone. I just stared at the road and thought about how many people had known more about my life than I did. Jillian, Nathan, maybe even her sister, who always acted weird around Claire's birthdays, like she was forcing herself to be nice. How many people had smiled at me while knowing the truth? When I pulled into the driveway, the house was dark except for the kitchen light. I could see Claire sitting at the table through the window. She hadn't left. Her bag was still by the door, untouched. When I walked in, she didn't look up. I was gonna go, she said without turning her head. But I realized I have nowhere to go. I stayed quiet. She kept talking. I called him. Nathan. I had his number. Mom gave it to me a few years ago. She said he was just someone from her past. I never thought. Her voice cracked. I never thought it'd be someone from my future. I sat down across from her. Her eyes were red. Her fingers were clenched around a mug she wasn't drinking from. I don't want to live with him, she said. He's a stranger. You're not. You sided with your mom, I said, not accusing, just stating a fact. Because I thought she made one mistake, she said. Now it feels like she built her life on top of that mistake and just hoped no one ever knocked on the walls too hard. I laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was exactly how I'd felt for weeks. She looked up at me then, and for the first time, there was no defense in her face. No stubborn daughter trying to prove she was grown. Just a scared kid realizing her entire life was built on a story someone else wrote. What do I do? She asked. And damn me, part of me wanted to say, you pack your stuff and figure it out. But the other part, the bigger part, the one that still remembered the sound she made the first time I let go of her bike and she didn't fall, just said, I don't know, but you don't have to do it alone. She burst into tears, slid off the chair and dropped to the floor beside me, her head pressed against my knee like she was 5 again. And I hated how much I still loved her. Because love doesn't vanish when the truth shows up. It just changes shape. I stroked her hair and said the one thing I knew was true. You weren't the mistake, Claire. You were just born into one. And I would carry the weight of that, whether or not she ever called me dad again. I should have expected her to show up that night. Jillian never let things end on someone else's terms. She was the kind of person who would knock on a locked door and then be offended that you didn't open it fast enough. It was almost midnight when the doorbell rang. Claire was asleep on the couch, curled up in an old hoodie of mine, the one from the state fair she used to steal in high school. I sat beside her, half watching a movie I wasn't following, trying not to wake her as I stood up and opened the door. There she was. Same trench coat she wore the night we signed our first mortgage. Same tired eyes. But something was different now. She looked smaller. Not physically, but in presence. Like the lies she'd been carrying had finally collapsed under their own weight. Can we talk? She asked. I stepped outside and closed the door behind me. I didn't want Claire hearing whatever this was going to be. Jillian stood on the porch, arms wrapped around herself like she was cold. It was 62 degrees. She wasn't cold. She was scared. I didn't come here to fight, she said. I came here to tell the truth. Finally. I crossed my arms, leaned against the railing. Took you long enough. She swallowed. Her voice shook slightly. I didn't know who the father was when I found out I was pregnant. I swear. I had just ended things with Nathan a few weeks before, and then we got together again. It was messy, confusing, and then I met you. I said nothing. She continued. You were kind, steady. You made me laugh when I didn't even remember how. You were good to me, and I was desperate for something that didn't feel like chaos. Thanks, I said flatly. I always dreamed of being someone's safe rebound. She flinched. I didn't plan to lie. At first, I thought maybe Claire was yours. I hoped she was. But the older she got, the more I saw him in her. Her eyes, her sarcasm, even the way she bites her nails when she's nervous. I closed my eyes. I didn't want to picture Nathan every time my daughter chewed her nails. I should have told you, Jillian whispered. So many times, I almost did. But every time I looked at you with her, I saw how much you loved her, how much she adored you. I didn't want to take that away. That's not love, I said. That's cowardice. She nodded. She didn't argue. That almost made me angrier. I told Claire the truth today, she added. Everything. About Nathan. About how long I kept this from you. I didn't sugarcoat it. Why now? She hesitated. Because she chose you. I blinked. What? She called me after you left. Said she didn't want to stay with me. Said you were still the only one who ever made her feel safe. My throat tightened. I didn't know what to say. Jillian stepped closer. She still wants you to be her father, Dennis. And I know I have no right to ask you anything, but don't walk away from her because of what I did. The audacity. I'm not walking away, I said. But let's not pretend this is noble. You had 19 years to make this right. You chose silence. You don't get a medal for finally speaking up after you blew up everything. Tears welled in her eyes, but I didn't care. I was too tired, too broken, too hollowed out from holding a family together with duct tape, while the people I trusted most built a second version behind my back. I loved you, she said quietly. For what it's worth. It's not worth much now, I said. She nodded and turned to leave. But just before she walked down the steps, she turned back. She's meeting him. Tomorrow. My heart stopped. She's going to meet Nathan? I asked. Jillian nodded. She wants closure. I don't think she knows what that looks like yet, but I just thought you should know. I said nothing. She walked away, and I stood there, frozen on my own porch, realizing that no matter how much pain we've been through, the real storm hadn't even hit yet. She told me she didn't want me to come. I didn't argue. This is something I have to do alone. Claire had said that morning, standing in the kitchen, arms crossed like she was trying to hold herself together from the outside in. I just need to see what I'm dealing with. She meant Nathan, the man who helped create her but never showed up for her scraped knees, violin recitals, or late-night panic attacks about college applications. The man who could sit across from her now with clean hands, because someone else had carried the weight for him all these years. Me. And now she wanted to meet him. Not because she thought he was better, not because she forgave Jillian, just because she was lost, and when you're drowning, even the wreckage looks like a lifeboat. So I didn't stop her. I just watched her walk out the door with that tight, nervous smile and told myself to let go. She needed this. Closure, clarity, whatever she thought she'd get. I needed to respect that. Still, I sat on the living room couch like I was bracing for an earthquake that hadn't hit yet. 10 minutes passed. Then 20. Then 32. And then my phone buzzed. Claire. He keeps calling me kiddo. It's weird. I stared at the message for a long time, rereading it over and over. A single sentence. Not a cry for help, not a plea. But it said more than she meant it to. The tone. The discomfort. The unspoken, I don't feel safe here, not really. I didn't respond. 5 minutes later, another text came through. Claire. He's telling me about his boat. And his other kids. He asked if I wanted to go fishing sometime. I told him I'm allergic to lake water. That's not even a thing. This time I chuckled. Not because it was funny, but because she was trying. Trying to stay grounded. Trying to keep the awkwardness from swallowing her whole. But something inside me shifted. I realized I wasn't angry at her anymore. Not even at Jillian, if I'm honest. The betrayal still burned, but what boiled hotter now was the understanding that no one had gotten out of this clean. Claire wasn't a traitor. She was a girl in the middle of a war she didn't start. And maybe Nathan wasn't a villain. Just a man who took the wrong exit 19 years ago and never circled back. But I was still here, still picking up the pieces. And I didn't know who I was outside of being Claire's father. The thought scared the hell out of me. I got up, walked to the garage, stared at the corner where her old tricycle still sat, half covered in a tarp. I hadn't thrown it out. Couldn't bring myself to. My hands trembled slightly as I pulled the tarp off and dusted it off with my sleeve. Stupid thing had a broken handle. I always meant to fix it. I sat down on the workbench beside it and stared at nothing for a long time. That's when a third message came. Claire. He just said he thought about me every birthday. I asked him what day my birthday is. He got it wrong. My chest caved. Not just from the mistake. Anyone could forget a date under pressure, but from the weight of what she wasn't saying. The way she had clearly wanted him to know. Needed him to. Like maybe that would have made the lie make sense. I picked up the phone and finally texted back. Me. Come home whenever you're ready. We'll order Chinese and rewatch that dumb cooking show you hate. 10 seconds later, 3 dots appeared. Then, Claire, thank you for not coming. But also, thank you for being there anyway. I sat there for another hour, watching the sun slip below the roofline of our neighborhood, thinking about how life gives you titles without instructions. Husband, father, ex-fraud. But you don't really understand them until someone tries to take them away. And somehow, tonight, I felt like I had earned one back. Claire came home just after 9. She didn't say anything at first. She just dropped her bag at the door and stood there, looking at me like she wasn't sure if she belonged here anymore. And I understood. She'd been to the other side of the glass. Met the man whose DNA shaped her bones, but not her memories. Shared air with a man who contributed to her life once, 19 years ago, then disappeared like a guest who leaves before dessert. She took a slow step forward. Hi, she said. I smiled. Hey. That was it. No dramatic music. No tearful embrace. Just two people trying to find their way back to something that had been cracked but not destroyed. I offered her a plate. Orange chicken, fried rice, and those scallion pancakes she pretends not to like but always eats half of. She sat beside me on the couch. We started watching the same ridiculous cooking competition show we always did. Judges screaming over undercooked risotto. Some guy setting fire to a creme brulee torch by accident. 20 minutes in, she leaned her head against my shoulder. I didn't move. And then, barely above a whisper, she said it. Dad, God. It hit harder than the test result ever did. Yeah. I answered, keeping my voice even though my throat was closing up. She didn't look at me. I know I messed things up. I know I hurt you. I didn't want it to be true. And when it was, I didn't want it to matter. I put down the plate. My hand found hers. It matters, I said. But it doesn't have to end us. She finally looked at me. Her eyes were tired. A little sad, but softer than before. You didn't deserve this, she said. I laughed, just a little. Parenting's never about what you deserve. It's about what you give anyway. And for the first time in what felt like forever, the tension between us cracked wide open. Not into a fight. Into something lighter. Honest. She leaned her head against me again, and I let myself exhale. A few days later, Jillian called. I didn't answer. She sent a text instead. Jillian, I know there's no fixing us, but I hope you're okay. And I hope Claire knows what she has in you. I didn't reply. Not because I was bitter. I just didn't need her to define anything for me anymore. Claire and I started doing small things again. Grocery runs. Watching dumb movies. She came with me to the DMV when I had to renew my license, complained the whole time, and then bought me ice cream to apologize. The big things? Those would take time. Trust, once shattered, doesn't come back as a full sheet. It returns in pieces, glued together by effort, jokes, late-night talks, and quiet mornings where no one says sorry, but both people show up anyway. Nathan sent her a birthday card a week later. She didn't open it. Just slid it into the drawer beside the microwave and said, later, maybe. She didn't ask to see him again, and I didn't bring it up. Instead, we rebuilt something not out of blood, but out of choice. She chose to stay. I chose to let her. And somewhere in the mess of it all, I realized something I wish I'd known 19 years ago. Being a father was never about who created the child. It was about who stayed when everything fell apart. And I stayed. So yeah, I think that counts.